Sitting on a bench with a box of chocolates beside him, Forrest Gump patiently waits for the bus. Meanwhile, he talks to the strangers who sit next to him, telling them, with the innocence and calm that define him, the incredible story of his life. Since childhood, Forrest lived in Greenbow, Alabama, with his mother, a loving and determined woman who always taught him never to let anyone make him feel inferior. As a boy, he wore leg braces to correct a spinal problem, something that made him the target of ridicule and curious stares. But his mother never allowed that to stop him. She repeated to him over and over, "Don't let anybody tell you you're different." Their house was big, with many rooms that his mother rented out to make ends meet. One of the guests who stayed there happened to be a young musician named Elvis Presley. Forrest, with his usual innocence, showed him a peculiar dance move to go along with the music, not realizing that years later, that move would become a worldwide phenomenon. Then came the day of his first school bus ride. The kids laughed at him and no one wanted to let him sit beside them. Until a girl with a sweet look broke the silence. "You can sit here if you want." Her name was Jenny, and from that moment she became his best friend and the great love of his life. They grew up together. They spent their afternoons talking, exploring the woods, and daydreaming. Jenny was his refuge, the only person who truly understood him, but not everyone was so kind. Forrest's classmates often bullied him, and one day they started chasing him, throwing rocks at him. That was when Jenny shouted the phrase that would define his destiny, "Run, Forrest, run!" And he ran. He ran so fast that his leg braces broke apart, revealing an astonishing gift. His ability to run. That speed became his blessing. Years later, it opened the doors to the University of Alabama, where he earned a football scholarship. His talent even got him recognized by none other than President John F. Kennedy. During his college years, he lost touch with Jenny, but life kept moving forward. After graduating, he decided to enlist in the Army, never imagining that there he would find another great friend, Bubba, a young man passionate about shrimp. The two of them dreamed of one day starting a shrimp company together when they returned home. However, their plans changed abruptly when they were sent to Vietnam. The night before leaving, Forrest flipped through a magazine and was stunned to see Jenny in a Playboy spread. He discovered that she had been expelled from college and was now working as a singer in a club in Memphis. Driven by the affection he still felt for her, he took a bus to find her. When he arrived, he realized the place was an adult bar, filled with smoke and leering men. Jenny, standing on stage, was singing naked while the crowd mocked and taunted her. Outraged, Forrest stepped in, defended her, and pulled her out of there.
He confessed that he loved her, but she sadly rejected him and asked him to leave.
Before saying goodbye, he told her that he was soon leaving for Vietnam, and Jenny made him promise one thing. "If you're ever in danger, run!" Shortly after, Forrest arrived in the Vietnamese jungle. There he met Lieutenant Dan, an experienced, tough, and commanding man from whom he learned much about discipline and leadership. Despite the exhaustion, humidity, and extreme training, Forrest never stopped thinking about Jenny. Every night he wrote her a letter, letters she probably never received. One day, during a patrol, his platoon was ambushed. Remembering the promise he made to Jenny, Forrest ran with all his strength and managed to escape the enemy fire. But when he looked back, he realized that Bubba wasn't there. Without hesitation, he ran back into the battlefield. Along the way, he found several wounded soldiers and carried them one by one to safety, including Lieutenant Dan himself, who begged Forrest to leave him behind to die. But Forrest refused. "I couldn't leave him," he would later say. When he finally found Bubba, the young man was gravely wounded. Forrest held him in his arms, trying to keep him alive, but he couldn't. Bubba died in the jungle, and with him, a part of Forrest's soul. After the ambush, Forrest was transferred to a military hospital with a gunshot wound to the buttock. There he was reunited with Lieutenant Dan, who was bitter and angry. He had lost both legs and blamed Forrest for not letting him die in battle, as he had wished. Despite the tension, Forrest remained optimistic and tried to cheer him up every day. During his recovery, Forrest discovered a new skill: ping pong. He started playing to pass the time, but soon realized he had a natural talent for it. He played with such speed and precision that he became a sensation in the hospital. Later, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his bravery in the war. personally presented to him by President Lyndon B. Johnson in Washington. After the ceremony, as he wandered the city, he accidentally found himself in the middle of a peaceful anti-war protest in front of the Pentagon. By mistake, an organizer pulled him on stage to give a speech. Forrest took the microphone and began speaking sincerely, but a soldier disconnected the sound system, so no one heard his words. And just then, a familiar voice broke through the noise. "Forrest!" Jenny was there in the crowd. Forrest ran toward her, overjoyed, and they embraced tightly. They spent the day walking around the city, reminiscing about old times and catching up on their lives. Jenny was now part of the hippie movement. She dressed in colorful clothes, joined protests, and sadly, had fallen into the world of drugs. She had a violent boyfriend, and when Forrest saw him mistreat her, he didn't hesitate to intervene and defend her. Even so, Jenny stopped him, asked him to leave, and the next day she disappeared, heading to San Francisco, leaving Forrest heartbroken once again. Time passed, and Forrest became a public figure thanks to his ping-pong skills. He represented the United States in an international tournament against the Chinese team, becoming a symbol of hope and perseverance. His fame grew so much that he was invited to television shows, even sharing a stage with John Lennon, unaware that one of his simple answers would inspire one of the musician's most famous songs. After one of those interviews, Forrest ran into Lieutenant Dan, now lost, consumed by alcohol and depression, living off a military pension. Even so, Forrest decided to spend Christmas with him. Little by little, they grew closer again and rebuilt their friendship. During a conversation, Forrest told Dan about the promise he made to Bubba to start a shrimp business. Dan, skeptical, replied sarcastically that if Forrest ever managed to do it, he'd be his first mate. Forrest took that statement very seriously. Months later, he traveled with the national team to the White House, this time to meet President Richard Nixon. The government lodged him in a nearby hotel, and by accident, Forrest noticed some men sneaking around with documents late at night. Without realizing it, he ended up exposing the Watergate scandal, one of the biggest political cases in U.S. history, which would eventually lead to the president's resignation. Shortly after, he received a letter notifying him that his military service had officially ended. Back home in Greenbow, he was offered a contract to promote a brand of ping-pong paddles. He accepted the offer and used the profits to fulfill the promise he had made to Bubba. He bought a shrimping boat which he named Jenny in honor of the love of his life. Meanwhile, Jenny goes through the darkest point in her life. Alone, depressed, and drowning in drugs, she considers ending her life. However, something deep inside her stops her at the very last moment. One day, while Forrest is out at sea, he sees a figure standing on the dock, Lieutenant Dan, who has come to fulfill his promise. He joins Forrest as his first mate, and together they begin their adventure as shrimp fishermen. At first, the business goes badly. They barely manage to catch a few shrimp, but everything changes after Hurricane Carmen, which destroys all the boats in the area except theirs. From that moment on, their luck turns around. The Jenny becomes a success, catching tons of shrimp every day and generating a fortune. Over time, Lieutenant Dan regains his faith in life and thanks Forrest for not abandoning him that night in Vietnam. But Forrest's happiness is interrupted by sad news. His mother is gravely ill. He returns home as quickly as he can and stays by her side until the end. In her final moments, she tenderly tells him, "Don't be afraid, son. Dying is just a part of life. We're all destined to do it." She explains that she feels her purpose in the world was to be his mother, and that she did the best she could. She firmly believes that every person has their own destiny, and that what matters is not what life gives you, but what you do with it. Forrest listens in silence, finally understanding what she always wanted to teach him, that life cannot be chosen, but one can decide how to live it. Maybe we can't choose how our story begins, but we can choose what to do with what we are given. That is where true freedom lies. As Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Forrest asks his mother what her own destiny is, and with the serenity of someone who has already understood everything, she replies with one of cinema's most memorable lines, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Each chocolate represents a possibility. Some are sweet, others bitter. And just like in life, one must dare to taste them all, without fear of what may come. Because if you don't, the chocolates and the opportunities are wasted. Some moments will bring sadness or pain, but then the sweetest ones will come, those that give meaning to all the rest. Soon after, Forrest's mother passes away, leaving him with a profound lesson: to accept life as it comes, but to live it with gratitude. With time, Forrest discovers that Lieutenant Dan invested the profits from their shrimp business in a small fruit company called Apple, making them millionaires. True to his kind heart, Forrest shares half of his fortune with Bubba's family in honor of their friendship and the promise he made in Vietnam. He also donates part of the money to a local church and the Fisherman's Hospital. To him, success means nothing if it isn't shared. He understands that no one achieves anything completely alone. There are always people, gestures, or stories that push us forward. One day, he receives an unexpected visit. Jenny returns. They spend days together, laughing, reminiscing, and keeping each other company as if no time had passed. Until one day, full of hope, Forrest proposes to her. She refuses, but that same night, they share an intimate moment. The next morning, Jenny leaves without saying goodbye, leaving Forrest heartbroken. Not knowing how to deal with his pain, Forrest simply begins to run. He runs without a clear destination, just to keep going. He crosses towns, deserts, and mountains. He runs for 3 years, coast to coast, until he becomes a national figure. People follow him, interview him, and turn him into an inspiration. Without realizing it, he inspires phrases, businesses, and ideas that later become famous. But one day, in the middle of the desert, he stops. Without any explanation, he decides it's time to go home. There, a letter is waiting for him. Jenny asks him to come see her. And that's when we understand why he had been sitting on that bench all this time. He was waiting for the bus that would take him to her. A lady tells him the address is very close, so Forrest gets up and runs once more, but this time toward his destiny. When he arrives, he finds Jenny waiting for him. She confesses that she has a son, and that his name is also Forrest. The man is speechless. He meets the little boy, plays with him, and for the first time feels what it's like to have a family. Jenny then reveals that she is sick with an unknown virus, a clear reference to HIV, and that her time is limited. She asks Forrest to marry her, and he accepts without hesitation. They celebrate a simple yet beautiful wedding full of love. Lieutenant Dan attends the event with his new titanium prosthetic legs and introduces his fiancée, Susan. But joy doesn't last forever. Jenny passes away not long after. Forrest buries her beneath her favorite tree, the one where they used to play as children, and from then on he visits her every day, talking to her as if she could still hear him. In the final scene, we see Forrest accompanying his son to the school bus stop. They sit together, sharing a silence full of tenderness. When the bus arrives, the little boy climbs aboard, and Forrest stays behind, waiting, just as his mother once did for him many years ago. The cycle repeats, but this time he understands his purpose. This idea invites us to live fully in the present, cherishing every moment because it will never happen again. And that is precisely what Forrest embodies: the ability to live with simplicity, authenticity, and gratitude without resisting the flow of life. His story reminds us that life is not about controlling everything, but about being present and transforming the ordinary into something extraordinary. Forrest Gump was not only a witness to historical moments. He was a man who, without planning, turned every encounter into a lesson, every loss into growth, and every step into an act of love. Because in the end, we all have a little bit of Forrest within us, walking, falling, learning, and finding meaning in the simple act of moving forward.